Good evening and welcome to how we're going to help you overcome or know when is the best time to ask for a salary increase. So today we're actually going to discuss quite a few areas that you're going to face, like barriers, and how to overcome some of those barriers when you're asking for a salary increase. I'm also going to incorporate two people today. One is my deputy CEO, and Maria. Welcome.
Hi, good evening.
So Maria
So
is
Maria is
she's a considerate and passionate and people-centric professional with over 15 years experience in recruitment and people development. She's also an entrepreneur like myself, and currently she's had her own business before, but she's also running her own psychometric and career development platform. I obviously met Maria when I was in Dubai, when I was just setting up the business. So I was very lucky and privileged to have met somebody that actually worked in recruitment and had that entrepreneurial mindset. And she now runs our personal brand optimizing business. And she's our deputy CEO. So welcome.
Thank you, Jessica. It's quite exciting to be with you this evening or your morning. I'm quite excited to get the show on the road.
Yes, I am too. We're waiting for one more person to join us. That is Candace. So Candace is she's our head of marketing and business development, and she has just a very, very interesting background as well. She's also a very considerate and passionate and very people-centric professional with over 19 years experience in sales and marketing. So we're extremely lucky to have a really experienced person. She's worked across multiple industries and verticals, and she's also worked with some of the likes of Nestle and, I think I'm going to say this correctly, Nikon or Nikon. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. But we're waiting for her to join us before we start. Just one moment. I think she's possibly having some technical difficulties. All right. So while we wait for her, we'll probably just actually start with some of the questions, because I'm really eager to start, but I'm also interested to hear a little bit about your personal experience. And one of the first questions I wanted to ask today was the barriers you may have faced. I did obviously prepare some questions for today. So before we sort of start, I think, let me Oh, okay. So she's having some technical difficulties, but that's perfectly fine. We'll just continue.
Cool.
I wanted to ask you. I've obviously worked with you for 3 years, and I don't think there was a time where we actually talked about our past experiences and work experiences.
No,
Oh,
no.
we have Candace. Okay. Hey.
Liz, how are you doing?
We're good. We're good. I just introduced you. You missed it. It was like this, like really like flamboyant and prestigious greeting.
I'm sorry, my internet was just keep dipping out.
No,
Apologies.
that's perfectly fine. We were actually just about to start. I was just introducing you and just sort of explaining a little bit about your history and your background from sales and marketing, and some of the industries that you worked in. And I think I said it correctly. I don't know. Is it Nikon or is it Nikon?
Well, you say it both ways, so depending on where in the world you are. But the
Right.
camera company, basically.
Right. Okay. So I'm just going to go with Nikon because that's how I see it.
That's a South African way of doing it, yes?
Yes, exactly. So I was just explaining to Maria, I would like to understand a little bit about both of your backgrounds. I'm very interested in understanding some of the barriers that you may have faced when the topic we're talking about is how and when you should be asking for a salary increase. So I'm really interested in also knowing some of the barriers that you faced, because I think the people that might be looking at this video and listening to us today could possibly be experiencing some of those barriers. And,
Yeah.
it's easy to say, hey, this is when you should be asking for a salary increase. But we don't know that some of these people are going through a certain level of fear and some low self-esteem and low self-awareness, and they don't understand how to overcome some of those barriers. And I do want to touch that a little bit today.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question to Maria is, I would like to understand, what were some of the barriers that you faced when you were working in your previous companies when it came to knowing you're about to ask for a salary increase? Were there any barriers you faced?
Absolutely. I think, being such a diverse and interesting topic that we're discussing today, you kind of have to go back into your memory bank and remember when you started working to the middle of your career, whatever point you're at, to where you are today, which, led me thinking in the beginning, you're kind of so self-assured, maybe you don't really know, you've got all the confidence of a newbie out there. So you feel like you can just, attack the market, get out there, you deserve it, you're working so hard. So in the beginning, I personally, I didn't have a fear of asking. I did ask probably very inappropriate times because I don't recall getting that increase immediately, maybe once, I don't know, I'll just put it out there. And then when you hit sort of like the mid part of where you're at in your life, with all the experience with the people you've worked with the different managements, with the different companies, I think that all played a part in personally asking for an increase. So I did face different roadblocks, if you want to say that. So whether I was in a company that I could see was in financial stress itself, it made me feel, there's no ways I can ask right now for an increase. So I would just keep quiet, carry on doing what I was doing, try keep, my position within the company, thinking if I do ask for an increase, they might let me go because they're already suffering financially, or not making it through, which shot me in the foot. I probably should have left much sooner, or I should have opened up my mouth much sooner.
Yeah.
Then on the flip side of the coin, when I was with an organization that was international, established, grounded, they had proper processes and procedures in place. It wasn't as difficult because I knew, okay, yearly you're going to get your performance appraisal. Yearly you're going to have your meeting with your manager. So, it's such a huge topic to try and cover it in, the time that we've got this evening. But I did find that in a company that's more established and more in tune with their processes, it was easier. I did ask, not in appraisal time. I didn't even think of that. I think I was, with a company just short of a year, and I was like, okay, I know, the 1 year mark. I didn't even think of budgets or, when they're going to be re-looking at stuff. I thought, okay, I've got to do it before my personal 1 year birthday anniversary in the company, and I was successful because thank God I had like a good relationship with my boss at that time. And we spoke openly and honestly. He obviously, he was like a mentor to me, and I did get that promotion. I mean, sorry, not promotion, that
salary increase.
Salary increase. But yeah, I think also, on the other side, like I said before, when you have somebody you're working with that is very intimidating, you do land up keeping quiet.
Yes.
So there's missed opportunity and gained opportunities. So that's my experience, what I've had, over the plus years that I've been working.
And I want to know Candace's background as well, because one, she's had her own business. Two, she's actually worked for really large corporations, which some people that are listening today are actually in that same position, working for corporations. They may not have that greater relationship with their manager because the team size might be big, or they may have different barriers. But I'm interested to know from your side, Candace, because one, you've worked for really large corporations and small corporations and your own business. So were there any barriers that you faced?
I think there's different barriers, like Maria was saying, there's different barriers depending on where you are in the company, the level you come in at, as well as how the company is doing. So from a sales background, because most of my roles have been in sales kind of spaces, you are only as good as your last sale. You're only as good as your last number. So if
Yeah.
you're not making your target every single month, there's no ways. Even if you're doing all the work, you're putting in all the effort, you're growing the company. And sometimes your targets, especially in big corporates, they're really unattainable. So some companies do that, I guess, so that you cannot escalate and that they can keep your budgets low. So understanding that, like I said to you guys in our little teaser yesterday when we were chatting about it, I had people in my life who I entered the workforce very early. So I entered when I was 17, 18, and all the rest of the people in my age category were going off to varsity. They were doing other things, continuing their studies, and I went straight into working. So I've been working for a very long time, but I was lucky in the way that I had people who were already 10, 12 years ahead of me, who were my friends, that's who I circulated with, right? So they gave me that kind of understanding of, they were already 10 years into the market, having all the pitfalls. And so they would say to me, like, don't let them push you around. You have to push. If you're not getting what you need here, you have to move to a different company. There is finance out there. You've got to go. And so it was actually quite interesting for my career, because I would ask at every company I went to. So the first 3 months, you're always on probation, and I would work myself to the bone, coming in early, staying late, making sure that not only did I meet, but I exceeded all of the expectations and targets, so that I could have that conversation. Because usually you don't get an increase after your probation, but they always lowball you at the beginning and then see how you're doing, because they don't want to use all their money up at once. And I found that when I did ask, I was in a much better place, because I could say, well, I've achieved all of this compared to other people who've come in. If we're all getting our 3-month probation at the same time, and my targets have all been exceeded, it was an easy place for me to be able to negotiate. So that was a learned behavior that I actually got from my social circle, more than having to learn it myself during work.
Yeah.
And when I got the negative, like, we just can't afford it, we're not able to do that, it was easy for me to look at it and go, I'm still young enough to move. I can still go to a different company. There are skill sets that I have that another company would embrace. This is my track record that I can move with. So instead of, even if I didn't get it after my 3 months, after a year or a year and a half of working, I would have enough credibility in the market to be able to move and not just look like I move every 3 months. So I was very conscious of those things, because I had really good guidance.
Yes. So I heard a quote once that really resonated with me, and it's I hope I get this wrong. When you're young, you work to learn, and when you're older, you work to earn.
Yeah.
So you always need to keep that in mind. So when you're younger and you're not happy about the salary that you're getting, think about the value with information and knowledge that you're learning.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm a very totally different person than both of you, because I did not once asked for a salary increase when I was working. Not a single time. My barrier was fear of not feeling good enough. Yes, I was always the first person in the office and the last person to leave. And I've always had the highest performance.
I think the thing is, you're like a lot of people in the industry. And in my first job, that is how I was. And I was overachieving. And that's when my friends pulled me aside and they were like, listen, you're going to have this problem your whole life because you're young. Companies always want young, virile people who are going to go in and attack the market because they know there's more always coming next year. So you can step aside, they can work you to the bone. So that's why they gave me that kind of advice. And I think the thing is, people stay locked in that kind of space because you're scared to stand up or say something for fear of rejection or fear of getting told that, you know, that they're letting you go. And it actually disarms you in a way, because you're not, the worst that someone can say to you is no. And for a couple of days, it's a little bit awkward. But eventually, I mean, you still have to do the work. You still have to continue.
Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact.
Don't walk past that director's office, or, you know, avoid few meetings. But it's sad because young people, like you say, you're learning in those kind of roles, and it's bad behavior that people pick up. Because everyone's also told, don't discuss salary, never discuss. So you don't know. You could be sitting next to somebody who's earning triple your salary, not coming in early, not leaving late, just doing it, just being there, just taking up a seat.
Yeah. Also, new people coming in at a higher salary bracket, and you're 3 years, 4 years, tenure into the business, and you're earning the same amount of money.
And it's because we assume that the company will see our value and then reward it. But that's not in the business best interest in their matrix. It actually is in their best interest, but to reward really good performance. But
Well,
why
if
would
if
they
it's a
offer?
conglomerate, if it's a huge business, it's process driven, right?
Yeah.
It's no longer a Candace and a Maria anymore. It is
Mm.
now employee number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the
Yes.
problem here, is that with big corporations, there is a process. This is your appraisal. This is the score you got. This is a 3.5 or a 5% increase. That's what the system says you're getting, and that's what you're
100%.
getting. Unless the only variable here is the you saying, okay, I don't think that this is fair. I need to have a conversation with somebody. Whereas
Definitely.
in the past, I didn't do that. I was getting those increases in my annual appraisals, and I was still unhappy. I was still unhappy with what I got, because I was giving more than the person next to me that was also getting the same amount of
Yes.
increase. And what I eventually built up enough resent to then eventually leave.
Which
After
is
like
sad,
9
because
years,
they lose an amazing asset. So they lose someone with 9 years worth of business experience with them. That's terrible as a company. So having
and
run
all I
my
had
own
to do
business,
is get off my seat and actually just say something. That is something I had to do. Yeah,
because from a corporate level, people won't, in general, they won't come down and say to you, hey, you've done really well. They might give you a small little bonus or something like that. Yeah, a certificate. A gift voucher for a spa or something, but it's not in their best business interest for bottom line to just increase you at a phenomenal rate every single time.
Yeah, it's great that they have those practices in place, but the individuality is lost in large corporations. So then the onus is upon the person that is in this position, saying, listen, I don't feel like the 3% I was given is enough. I would like to have another review, a personal review, and then discuss what I think is fair. And then so if there's a process involved, you're more likely to get that increase because there's a process already involved and you can question it. All right, perfect. I did write down a few barriers that some people might actually have faced. So I want to just quickly mention some of them. And then I want to talk about the one which is performance, because that's one that I think we can actually overcome. So we've got a few things. We've got budget constraints, small or big. Small companies that can't really afford increases, and that's the conversation you're going to engage in. We've just hired somebody new, so it's not within our capabilities to do that. Bad environment, narcissism within leadership. I don't think that you should be doing this. You haven't done that, but you've done this well, but you haven't done that. So just that level of narcissism in leadership, low self-esteem, which was my issue, and then low self-awareness, which is not knowing that you're actually doing well, where companies aren't doing performance reviews. So nobody's recognizing that. So you're just trotting along every day. And then lastly, which is performance. So the biggest one for me is always going to be performance, because it's one of the easiest barriers to overcome. The others will take time. It will take practice. It will take advice from people, constantly speaking to people that are in a position to provide you with some really credible advice, friends, family, colleagues, other people in those positions where they're actually in a very like-minded position. If you're in HR and they're in HR, you need to be discussing and finding out where you're supposed to be at. And one of the things I've got 4 comments on overcoming the performance barrier. The first one is get feedback. If you're in your organization and your organization doesn't have a performance review, a regular performance review, you're supposed to get feedback. Saying, if you've worked on a project, what you want is an email from the manager saying, hey, I would like to know some feedback. Were there areas I could have improved in? What did I do well? And this is my favorite thing. Get receipts, get documentation. Don't do this verbally. Get receipts, document, write it down.
Sorry to interrupt you. It's interesting that you say that, because it's something that I did learn when I was young. Now that you're saying it, it's amazing, because I'm giggling to myself, because every time I finish something, I ask. It's a natural, it's almost like getting it's just a mini check review to say, was there anything I could have done differently? Are you happy with this quality? Is there something else you needed from me so that I can learn for the next time? And it's actually proved a really good tool. And I didn't think about it. It's just something I've obviously naturally picked up over the years, but it's not something that I think, okay, you need to get this result, you need to get this review. It's just something that I now organically do.
Absolutely. And it's great for you because that was instinctively for you. For some people, they need to learn this. They need to go, I've never asked for feedback. And one of the most, and this is one of the best tips I give people is ask for, and I've done this, ask for feedback of your performance while you work at the company on LinkedIn. Get your manager to tell you how great you are while you're working there on LinkedIn, because sour grapes never taste the same. If you leave there and this person's not going to give you the same kind of recommendation when you left than what you have, than what you can get when working there.
Definitely.
I always used to go. So from my previous company, I said, hey, could you give me some recommendations on my performance? You can go to my LinkedIn right now and look at all of the recommendations I got. I got them while I was working at those companies.
Yeah.
That was the number one thing I always thought of doing, is making sure that I'm recognized for the work that I have done, because I knew I was going to end up somewhere else eventually, although I worked for like 8 years. So, but still, I wanted, and my previous company was like 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, 10 years is important, but this was important for me to understand, what were you thinking of me while I was working there, instead of now I've left, what do you think of me now?
No, it's very good.
The feedback while you're working there. Get your receipts, document. The second thing I want to tell people is committing to change. When there is something that's told, saying, for instance, let's say, for instance, leadership is a capability or a characteristics that they want you to improve, commit to actually changing it. Finding out exactly what are the areas that you need to improve, and then finding out the resources available in your current organization to get you there.
Yes.
Again, document. Appraisal document's got a date on it. It tells you who's there to support you. And then make sure that you keep copies of those, because that's going to be the subject for the next appraisal. You're going to go there and you're going to say, okay, well, previously you told me I was earning, this is a 3 points for my leadership, but you're giving me 3 points again, but I've managed to do 4 or 5 things to improve myself. How are we still on a number 3? So make to change and document. The third one is obviously making those actual changes. So committing to changing and finding out the resources is different than actually making the changes. The changes should be felt. If it's felt, it will increase productivity, it will increase performance, and most definitely increase morale within the business. And if you have a happier team, you have higher productivity. And I always tell clients, find out on a survey, if you've done something that's increased morale and productivity, find out what the number was on the survey before you did it, and then what was the number after you did it, because you've got to document it. So make sure that you commit to those changes. And then lastly is increasing the productivity, is actually monitoring your productivity on a longer scale. So not just today and like, oh, what am I doing tomorrow? It doesn't work that way. So make sure that you take it over a quarter, which is usually the best time. And then obviously before the next appraisal. So make sure that you do actually increase your productivity. And there's a way of finding out how you've managed to do that. And you can do that in any job, whether you're a receptionist or a CEO of a company, because as a receptionist, your job is to make sure that the way the calls are coming in is getting carried over to the right person. Do you have errors? Do you have wrong numbers? You can have performance in any role: admin, reception, customer service. I had a client this week that was in procurement, and he was working on making sure that he obtained 3 quotations. And I said, okay, so your job was to make sure that you got the lowest price, because price was the main objective here. And I said, do you know how much money you saved the business? And he goes like, no, that's not really a thing for us. And I said, yes,
that's
a
big thing.
That's a big thing. It should be. So that's important to note that, and ask your manager, just so out of interest, did I manage to save the company any money? You're like, yeah, actually you did. And you can leave an organization knowing you've done that. Instead, you leave an organization thinking you haven't had any contribution or impact in the organization.
That's the thing. So even if you leave, at least they know what the asset was. So if you do phone them later for a reference, say they don't give references during the time that you're there, because some companies won't, because they feel that's you looking for another role instead of just understanding it's you empowering yourself. Some companies don't like you to empower yourself, just a heads up on that, obviously. But yeah, it's actually a very good tip to, because even if you do leave them, they still feel like, wow, that person was great at what they did. They'll remember that they told you, yes, you saved us this much. You said, because once it's in a figure in their head, they won't forget it.
Yes, absolutely. I always tell clients when I was in recruitment, if your company actually gives you a counter offer, if you've left that company and you get a counter offer, think about it like this, because before you go back, think about the fact that, one, they're saying that they could have paid you more, but they decided not to. So they took advantage of that. So I always tell them to think about that, because when you do stay, you have to always remember that you were worth more and they took advantage of you for an entire year.
And so your role might, they might feel like they need to get their pound of flesh. So they feel like they're paying you that much more. And so they will start putting on a lot more work instead of what your role is actually worth. They'll start adding extra things on because they're giving you extra money, especially if you're an overachiever who always performs over, then they get to a level of just expecting that for your salary. So when you start not doing that, it's like, oh, wait, you're not doing your job anymore. But actually that wasn't, you took on other roles.
Yes. And if there's a restructuring happening within their company, who are they going to remember wanted to leave first? So it's always a bad idea to accept a counter offer, but it's a personal choice. Some companies actually do really value their employees and go like, listen, we're sorry we didn't recognize you. Here's back pay. Here's the promotion. Here's the salary.
Exactly.
Let's move on. We value you. So they are
also,
not
they
every
don't know that
bad.
Sorry, Jen. They don't know that you've been unhappy unless you say something. So unless you say I'm leaving, some people don't say, and then they assume you're happy, that you're working within the, your salary brackets and you're fine.
Exactly.
So unless you say something and give them the reasons, if you just leave or just tender your resignation, they might think, oh, wow, what was the stopping block for you? Oh, it was financial. Let's help you with that. We didn't realize. So those kind of counter offers make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I've got a few more questions, but I think I want to kind of just jump into some of the mediums that you can ask for salary increases. Because what you want to do is always try and do the verbal communication first, and I would like to have people say in an email saying exactly why they want to meet with the manager, and say, listen, I would like to review my performance, to look at a possible salary increase, and I tell people to do that through an email, through a performance feedback. So when you're doing your actual performance review, that the manager actually writes it down and you actually see it. And when it gets sent to you to review it, you go like, oh, okay, Jessica asked for a salary increase. It's there. Also, a formal letter is going to be another medium of doing so, is actually writing down a letter with everything you've done well in. Remember those receipts we were talking about, the documents? You can add all those supporting documents. It's hard to dismiss that. It's hard to dismiss 500 pages of great performance and a 3% salary increase. What do you mean? This is all I've done and this is all I'm getting. So bring that formal letter is my personal favorite, and I think I always recommend people to do that. But in an email, it's documented and it's sent through, and there's proof essentially that you actually have asked for it. So that was one of the things I wanted to discuss as well. I wanted to quickly talk before I gave some of the tips now to when and how to ask. So the how is obviously through those mediums, but the when is also going to be important. The feelings that you guys were feeling in terms of asking for a salary increase, what were some of the feelings you guys were actually feeling? Because I know that if I were to ask for one, I would feel immense anxiety, because I wouldn't even know where to start. What does this person, maybe they'll fire me because I've now asked for a salary increase. So I know for myself, it was immense anxiety.
Yeah. Maria, do you want to jump in first?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. That fear of rejection, the fear of making a fool of yourself. I think feeling like, is this the right time? Is it not the right time? Is there ever a good time? You never know when when you should be doing it. You always try sometimes talk yourself out of doing it, saying, okay, I haven't been here that long, or it's almost 1 year, maybe I should wait for the 1 year mark, or
Yeah.
you try and give yourself excuses on when to actually approach the increase topic or whatever. I think, but mainly for myself, it is that fear of rejection. I hold my work to a very high standard, and I take it very, very personally. So if someone doesn't see value to that by saying, no, you're not getting an increase, to me, that's okay. You don't see value in my work. I take it very personally because I am an emotional person, and it like kind of crushes my spirit, and I think, I'd rather not hear that and carry on like a horse with blinders on and just go, than hear that. I think when your spirit's crushed, I always think, your performance moving forward will change. I don't think you'll be able to have that same spirit and that same enthusiasm like you did.
For every negative thing that happens, you have to do 10 more positive things to cancel out that negative thing.
Yeah. So
It will
it's
take a
like,
long
rather
time to
don't
build
know
that
and
up.
carry on than know and then face what's next. Because if you are rejected and you are being told no, you have to know, okay, if that happens, I mean, a no is a no. Am I willing to continue, or am I willing to look at it for what it is and either say, thanks, guys, for the journey, I'm worth more, bye, or whatever the situation is.
Yeah.
Or be able to look at it and say, okay, maybe they give you really relevant reasons. So perhaps they've just done a merger or something, and you think, oh, this is a good time. But that's because you think, oh, we've just acquired a new company, so we must be rolling in it. But unfortunately, at a corporate level, that's when they're at their lowest, because they've just expended so much money, so they can't physically give it to you. So they want you to stay. But then you'd want to hear things like, okay, in 6 months, once we've reached this target, so okay, I'm coming back at that point. That at least gives you something to hold on to versus just the flat no, where it is hard to pick up your spirits and just keep going unless you're that type of person, because it's soul destroying. It's like, it gives you anxiety. It makes you resentful. You can be super angry about it as well, which is obviously not a healthy situation to be in, because you have to pack yourself into your car every day and get to your job. And you can't have all of that on you.
And this is where the leadership is quite an important, plays a pivotal role, because in terms of the question being asked and then those feelings that are going on, it is important to know that there's going to be somebody that comes back to you and go like, hey, how are you feeling about the other day? Because sometimes just asking how are you feeling, just remember, we value you, we want to see you grow, can be the make or break of that person.
Definitely.
So yeah, I hope that a lot of people actually go back to their managers and say, listen, can I just talk to you about what happened the other day? I'm feeling a little bit anxious, and just kind of feeling a little bit more settled. And I'm hoping that a lot of leadership people do that when they have that conversation. And that's not something we can do for ourselves. That is definitely a leadership thing.
Yeah, you need to feel supported.
Yes, absolutely.
And
if you don't get it at your company, you need to have that friend, that colleague, that expert, that advisor person to go back and say, you know what, this is a common thing that happens. Don't worry about it. People ask for this all the time. You need to speak to somebody. You need to be able to just work through those feelings.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna I'm gonna give some advice on when is the best time to actually ask for a salary increase before we go to the how. So the when is actually day one. Day one, you should be asked the day you sign so before you actually sign the contract. No, I mean day one of your so companies would generally set expectations saying this is the working time, this is what the office is, this is where you eat. It's part of their induction process. So what I normally advise people to do is on day one, when they say, do you have any questions? Is to go, okay, yes, what is your mentorship program? What's your development program? How is it possible that I can get an increase? What is expected of me to get an increase? Because if I know on day one this person is expecting an increase, on day 365, when I've been there for a year and I go like, hey, so remember the conversation we had this day? We discussed these things. I actually did all these things. I would like to have a conversation about my salary, especially in a company that doesn't have a process. So day one, to set the expectation that they know you're going to ask it, because when you then ask it, you remove some of that anxiety because they're expecting it.
And you're expecting it.
Exactly.
You're counting
I'm
down
like
the days.
365 in my calendar. Gosh, salary increase conversation. Yeah, so day one is the time to actually start asking this question, and then knowing that that's going to be, because then you can say, they'll say things like, well, we actually have a performance review plan, which every year everybody gets their salary, their general salary increases.
Yeah.
And then you can ask another question, say, okay, so if the standard increases, let's say 3%, and I feel like I've done more, is there flexibility within this increase? Because you need to know if there's going to be flexibility from the start of the process. It's not going to be helpful going in 365, doing all of that work, and then knowing, no, there's no salary increase here. You're going to have the same salary for your entire tenure here. Then you know, okay, day one, I'm not going to waste anybody's time.
And if it's performance based only, so can you accelerate your growth, or will everyone just be getting the same standard, and that's just
Yes,
what it is?
you can also ask it before you actually sign the actual contract. Remember, you need interest to negotiate. So if they've sent you an offer, you have something to negotiate with. So in that, I will read the contract, and if it says anything about increases, go through it, make sure that the amendments can be made, and actually have that put into the contract. So day one is extremely important to set the expectation. So that's the when, and then obviously the when is when you've decided when to have this conversation. If they say that after your probation you get reviewed again, you ask the question, what does that mean for me? Does that mean I get taken on permanently, and does that impact my salary? So after probation, so you have to ask right in the beginning. So day one is the most important day to set the expectation. The when you've not done that, and let's say for most of you listening that you're okay, shoot, Jess, I didn't ask this when I started, what now? The best time to ask this is before budgeting, because they're trying to budget for the next year's budgets. That's the best time to ask. It's going to be important to ask that a couple of months before then, and say, hey, with regards to the budget season, does salary increase, is that considered in this process? And they can say yes or no, because when you ask after budget season, you get the answer of, well, it's not, there's nothing in the budget for this. I wish I knew. I wish I knew.
I saw that a lot in the corporate industries, because you budget 3 to 6 months ahead of time. So people have to know well before. So if you've just started at a company and you don't think after 6 months it's not the appropriate time for you, by the time it's your 1 year, because it doesn't mean that the adjustments are made in your 1 year. So it's good to find out when that is happening and when the budget consideration is for salary specifically. Sometimes it doesn't fit in with the normal increase strategy. I mean, the budget strategy. Sometimes it's separated out. So it just depends on the company.
Yeah. It's interesting. I did a poll the other day, and I actually asked this question. I was going to try and see if I can share some of the feedback from the poll with everybody today. Let me see here what the poll is, because I think it's got 2 days left, but we have over 100 people that have voted already. So it's interesting. So the question was, when is the best time to ask for a salary increase? We had after probation, after 1 year, after your appraisal, and during budget season. And after probation was 7%. After 1 year was 26%. After your appraisal was 55%. And think about this. After your appraisal, budget season's done.
Yeah, it's too late.
It's way too late.
Unless the companies are appraising before budget season for that reason, in which case they are a massive conglomerate who uses that as their steps for budgeting. But most companies are not.
And the appraisal is actually linked to the compensation and benefits process. If that's the case, then obviously that would be a great time to do it, because you're expecting a salary increase. The great time is just to let you, that question of, if I'm only getting my 3%, is there flexibility? That
Yeah.
question needs to be happening way before the time.
Yeah.
And I think the last one was during budget season, which was 12%.
Mm.
And it was a kind of little sneaky because it said during budget season, and that's not the case. It has to
Before.
be way before budget season. And you're quite right, Candace. 6 months, if you've been there for 6 months and you know, like, oh, I don't feel worthy yet, it's not the point. The point is in 6 months' time when budget's done, that's the time. But you want to know there is money set aside for your salary increase. So it's
And
definitely.
people think, sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No.
People think it's a bad thing to ask.
It's a fresh thing, this, you interrupting me, you know.
But people think it's a bad thing. But having managed people, it always showed me who the people were who were prepared to perform. Because you don't ask if you're going to get more money unless you're prepared to put in the work. Because if you come to me and ask the question, what do I need to do to increase my salary? And I give you the performance task, then I'm going to measure you on the performance task. So it shows me the people who are ready and hungry to go. I mean, I did manage a lot of salespeople, so that's also was that. But a large part of my career was also a huge operational division. And those people actually are less inclined to ask for increases than salespeople. Salespeople are because you're dealing with the number. So you see, oh, wow, I brought in $1 million, I brought in 4 million, I brought in 6 million. So you start to think in your head, okay, this goes all to the operational costs. There must be this much, you think like a salesperson, you work in percentages. So it's easier for you to make that like first step.
Yeah. I worked in a company where they were making money, but they were trying to change structures and positions because they didn't want to pay so much money. So they were making money, but they were thinking of ways of how not to provide that level of salary increase or commission increase to people. So I know that is something that happens, which is why you have to set the boundaries and set the expectations from day one.
Yeah. And it's more for yourself actually than for the company, because you need to know, am I staying? Am I going? Like Maria said, are you prepared to walk away or say, can I tolerate this? Is paying for my house with the salary adequate in my head? Does that make sense? So you need to know what you can budget for in your own life.
Yeah, that's probably why, like, when I left and I started my own business, and I am now in that position of now I have to review everybody. We're lucky because we have still Candace and Maria. We're small enough to still have not employee 001.
Yeah.
So we are still quite lucky. And that's probably one of the things that I took from my older companies is that level of anxieties. I don't want people to have that type of anxiety that I had. So I'm always proactive with those types of things. And that's obviously one of my top priorities is recognizing people with salaries within my means, obviously. True. But it is certainly something that I've used to implement into my current company, just because I understand those were barriers, and I've made those changes to do that. And I do encourage people to make sure, like you said, get the documentation ready when you're discussing it, and also get what is expected of you. So if you're having that discussion during budget season or before budget season, and they go like, I just want to let you know I'm going to have this conversation about my salary increase in 6 months' time. Just so you know before budget season that, this is what you can expect from me.
It's coming.
Yeah, you go to your manager's diary and just make it like a little red star.
Do all the X's on their diary.
Salary increase conversation. Yeah. If it's expected, then you're less anxious about that conversation. Yeah. So before we go, I want to just let you know the how. Obviously, the how is through those mediums: email, formal letter, and performance feedback. And if your company doesn't do any performance feedback, is get feedback from your managers on a regular basis, because you need that when you're going to have those conversations.
Yeah.
So make sure you've got that. If there's no performance reviews and it's a small company and they don't really have something in place, then you need to be able to have that conversation with them. And you need to understand that you may not get a 10% salary increase. You need to be okay with what is within that organization's means. Yeah. But you need to be able to say, listen, this is what I've achieved. This is what I've done. I want to have a conversation about my salary. So the how is very formal. Email, make sure that there's something in writing, for performance feedback when that is happening, and then obviously a formal letter with all that documentation attached, so you can send that into an email.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's really good advice. Really helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's why I said I was extremely excited about this conversation, because I think I even kept it from you guys. I was like, okay, I'll give you a little bit. Yesterday, I was like, oh, they're going to just lose their mind when they hear that it's day one.
Don't you see our faces on the day one? We were both like,
What?
but it's a good point. It's a very good point as to why. So not just being greedy, it's the rationale behind it of setting yourself up for what you have to do to achieve that.
Yes, and overcoming those boundaries that we face before they even erupt.
Get them. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Ladies, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And you guys have a good evening, and we'll probably do this again soon, and be able to provide some feedback to everybody.
Definitely. Sounds good. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.